Hello, everybody. I'm back, and it's been a little while in terms of this project, but I'm going to be doing the watch list for February 2021. So, His House, I would say, was this horror movie, and I would think I've been looking for some good horror, and luckily, His House fits it. It has a spooky atmosphere and has some really good nightmare horror imagery that I've been kind of craving. And it does an interesting twist on the haunted house dynamic. I've been kind of curious about how you take a genre like the haunted house and sort of add new dimensions to it. And I think attaching it to a different kind of racial perspective and also cultural perspective gives it new life. You have more things you can pull from, and I think His House definitely benefits from that. And I also like the way this movie sort of subtly explores the effects of like racial tension. It gets into that more subtle microaggressions in terms of racial dynamics in this film that I thought the way they did it was really good. And I definitely like that. And I have to say the two leads of this film give a fantastic performances. You have Sope Dirisu and you have Wunmi Mosaku, who you've probably seen on Lovecraft if you watch that show, and they really hold this film together in terms of just their acting and the different shades that they show, and even their dynamic in terms of a husband and wife. It's not a traditional dynamic in some spots, and I think that definitely helps the movie. And the script is tight. It's only like an hour and a half, and I've been appreciating movies that just get in and get out. So yeah, if you're looking for some good horror, I would definitely recommend His House. So now let's get into this movie, I Care a Lot. So I didn't hear much about this movie, and then I just saw it pop up on Netflix, and it was getting some good reviews. So I just went, you know what, let me watch it. I'm a fan of Rosamund Pike, so let me watch it. I would say Rosamund Pike gives another memorable performance. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really tend to go see movies just because Rosamund Pike's the lead, but I'm glad I watched this one because she's been definitely giving this catalog of good performances of playing these very icy, very kind of mercenary-ish kind of characters who are out for themselves. And she does a good job here as the main character, Marla. Even though I'm not gonna lie, the performance did remind me, it kind of feels like another variation on the Amy Dunn performance, who was like, another kind of icy, mercenary kind of person. But hey, Rosamund Pike does it really well. This movie's really stylish. I thought the cinematography was really good, and the way it uses color of the aesthetic almost has this look of sort of it's like a Venus flytrap, where it looks really appealing on the outside because it's hiding the fact that a lot of these characters are doing some pretty scuzzy bad stuff, but it has this like outer layer of civility and niceness. And Rosamund Pike's character, I think, is really the embodiment of that aesthetic of the film. But yeah, it looks really good. Chris Messina, he kills it as this sort of Better Call Saul-esque lawyer that shows up, and he's really somebody who's been kind of standing out to me ever since I saw him in Sharp Objects and then in Birds of Prey. He's definitely an actor I'm starting to watch. He's good, man. I hope he gets a moment to really shine in maybe a starring role or something. Also, Peter Dinklage, I did not know he was in this movie until I started watching it, and Peter Dinklage is another one of those guys, man, where he's really solid. He's not if you cast him in your movie, you're putting a powerhouse in there, and he definitely lends this part that I don't think is necessarily super deep. He lends it some gravitas and adds some depth, and I'm just happy to see him in something post the whole Game of Thrones debacle. I will say this movie starts stronger than it ends. I do think it's a little too long. They could have probably trimmed off about 10-15 minutes. I think this movie's a little over 2 hours, and I definitely think they could have shortened it to tighten it up a bit. I do wonder if some of the legal activities are possible in this film. They have it where, so basically, Rosamund Pike's character is this sort of legal guardianship where when a person becomes too old and is ruled not competent anymore, she's a legal guardian that gets sent in. But some of the powers that legal guardians have, at least depicted in this movie, are troubling. Like the fact that the legal guardian can seize the funds of the old person, or seize their property, and can really control a senior citizen person, and that was definitely troubling. It definitely, and also I'm just going to add this to the pantheon of a good example of why healthcare and capitalism don't mix and should not be put together. I definitely think this is a step in terms of Netflix's movie production game. This definitely struck me because some of their movies kind of have a look and feel to them where you go, this doesn't quite feel like a mainstream movie that would have came out in theaters, but this definitely feels like that. And also to end the talk about I Care a Lot, Jake Blakeston, he's the director of this movie. I definitely think after this film, I'm going to be keeping an eye out for him because he seems to be a promising young director who I think is going to make something pretty memorable in the coming years. So keep an eye out for him. Now, I had heard about this movie because I heard there's this new app called Shudder, which is a horror movie app. I have not bought it yet because, your boy is broke. But I have also dreamed of having a horror movie app, and I heard about this film, so I thought I would give it a watch. And this movie is interesting because this was shot during COVID. So the movie takes place completely online through video chats and cell phones, very similar to the Unfriended premise. But I think Host is a better take on the Unfriended premise. The way it uses its scares and the way it uses the technology that the characters are using to tell this story, I think it's done a lot better. And of course, I think Unfriended paved the way for it to happen, but I just think Host does it better. This movie has some really clever scares in it, and I think the shooting it on cell phones and webcams, it adds this layer of reality to it. And I would say the effects work is pretty good. And there's certain scares that is tied to the technology that they're using that I think really makes it where this sort of gimmick of shooting it through the internet is not just a gimmick. They also use it. They also get scares from it that you can only get by embracing a format like that. I will say the beginning is pretty slow. It takes about 15-20 minutes for it to get going. But once it goes, it's really entertaining. But also it has the problem that I've also had with Unfriended and movies that are like this, which is that when you're telling a story through this sort of webcam format, it does not add your ability to really flesh out characters and know them as people is limited to a certain extent because, in a traditional movie, you can have it where the camera's on a person and you can see the moments of doubt on their face. But the thing is, it's not as if the characters in a traditional movie know they're being filmed by some kind of omniscient camera. But in this movie, you're limited to whenever a camera can feasibly be there, and most people are not in the habit of filming themselves or they're in particularly vulnerable moments. So yeah, if you're looking for some solid horror, give Host a look. So I had heard about this movie because when I'm trying to do reviews and whatnot, I'll go through IMDb and see what movies are coming up so I can kind of plan when I can do these kind of videos. And Barb and Star was one that popped up, and I was surprised that I wasn't really hearing much about it because Kristen Wiig's in it. I mean, I guess post Wonder Woman 84, maybe that's why, but I doubt it. I'm just joking. I doubt it. But this movie came out and it was getting some fairly positive reviews. So I went, you know what? Let me give it a look. I have to say this movie is a lot of fun, and it's a throwback to comedies in a way, which you don't really see traditional comedy movies anymore. But this movie is totally bonkers. Like it's going on. It gets laughs in ways by just sort of making where the characters are in a reality where anything can kind of happen. It actually kind of reminds me of old sort of Mike Myers movies, like the Austin Powers series, now that I think about it. Except this does it in a different kind of way. Sometimes the Austin Powers movies could just get so random, but this movie, it has a way of being really random, but knowing kind of when to hold the line, and I appreciate that. Also, Jamie Dornan from the 50 Shades of Grey, he is so much fun in this movie. I'm starting to realize that some of these like hunky actors get typecasted in things, and I would like to see them embrace comedy. This kind of reminded me of when I watched the movie Spy with Jenny McCartney. Did I say that right? Melissa McCartney, my bad. Ooh, I heard those two are not getting along. But Melissa McCartney's Spy, and Jason Statham's in it, and he is one of the funniest parts of it. And when I saw it, I couldn't help but go, this guy can do this. Why are you just casting him in action movies? And now I'm feeling kind of similar about Jamie Dornan of, he's hunky, he's a good looking guy, but I actually didn't know him first from 50 Shades of Grey. What I knew him from first was, I think this procedural with Gillian Anderson. I think it's called The Fall or something, where he plays a serial killer. But even seeing the fact that he could do this comedy stuff, I was surprised. So if you're a fan of his, and if you want to see him do something different, give Barb and Star a look. Also, the two lead actresses, Kristen Wiig and Annie Mumolo, they're so good. Now, Kristen Wiig, we've already known for a while. She's solid, especially in comedies. But Annie Mumolo, she is really good here, and I'd actually like to see her in more comedies. Like, she just really gives a performance where she just goes for it. So I hope to see these two working with each other more, and I hope to see them more in the future. We need more comedies. And yeah, you just don't really see big budget comedy movies like this. Like, this movie's also a musical in certain parts, and I think especially in these self-isolated times, it's fun to watch a movie that's just bright and fun and silly. And so yeah, I would definitely say if you're looking for a fun comedy, give Barb and Star a look. So I would say within the last 2 years, I would really say 2019, I became part of the Danny McBride cult. Danny McBride was a dude that I didn't really get before when I was younger, but through watching shows like The Righteous Gemstones and Vice Principals and Kenny Powers, I see why people like this guy. Danny McBride, okay, I've been wanting to talk about Danny McBride for a little bit, but Danny McBride is interesting because he's doing a shtick that's not, the kernel of it is not too different from something like what Will Ferrell was doing in his peak of playing these sort of like men, children, these men who are so arrogant that they just cannot read the room, and they're like delusional, where they think they're way more competent and cooler than they actually are. But Danny McBride does it in a way that oddly grounds it, but also is not afraid to go darker. And sometimes the going darker with it actually makes it funnier. And I don't know why, but it's interesting because The Fistfoot Way was the first movie that he was in. This is actually one of the movies that sort of put him and Jody Hill and them on the map. And it was interesting to watch this movie. You can definitely see that it kind of has this feeling of a bunch of friends making a tiny little film. It has an interesting premise of him being this like fake dojo guy and whatnot. And it's also fun if you're a fan of the Jody Hill, Danny McBride crew, of seeing them get their early start. You know, you can see several people in this movie that are staples of the Jody Hill, Danny McBride crew. And I would also say that you don't see comedies like this anymore. This movie came out in 2005, before the whole, cancel culture and whatnot. So this movie is mean-spirited in a way that comedies, you just don't really see them doing that anymore. And it was kind of refreshing to see, but I can also see why we've left things like that behind. I will say that when you're watching The Fistfoot Way, you can definitely see the kernels of Danny McBride and Jody Hill's aesthetic and their sort of comedy chops. But in this movie, it's definitely not honed to a razor sharp edge the way it is when you watch something like a Righteous Gemstones or a Kenny Powers. And yeah, but if you're a Danny McBride fan, I would say it's worth a look. This is streaming on Hulu right now. I would say give it a watch. So hey, that was my February 2021 watch list. Let me know if you've been watching any of these movies. If you have, leave some comment down below. And make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And I will talk to you guys later. Bye.